like to call to order the Pentucket Regional School Committee meeting on October 1st, 2019. Roll call, Wayne Adams.
Here.
Joanna Blanchard. Bill Buell. Emily Dwyer.
Here.
Marie Falzani.
Here.
Dick Hodges.
Here.
Lisa O'Connor here. Chris Redding.
Here.
And Dina Trotter.
3.2.
We all rise to say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can I have a motion to accept the agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? The next item on the agenda is the minutes. Can I please receive a motion to accept the Business, Finance, and Operations Subcommittee minutes from September 17th, 2019?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Can I please have a motion to accept the minutes of the Teaching, Learning, and Accountability Subcommittee meeting from September 17th, 2019?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Can I please have a motion to accept the business meeting minutes from September 3rd, 2019?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Not seeing any, all in favor? Can I please have a motion to accept the business meeting minutes from September 17th, 2019?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Okay. And subcommittee updates. Emily, Teaching, Learning, Accountability.
Nothing since the minutes that are in the packet.
Marie, Policy.
Yeah, we met last Tuesday and we discussed the 3 policies that you'll see tonight, and we're hoping to possibly meet next Tuesday.
Time on that, please. Is that 9 to 11?
Yeah, 9:30.
9:30, thanks.
Okay, Chris, Business, Finance.
Nothing remarkable.
Okay.
We'll
And
see
Dean
more
is not.
afterwards.
Okay. Thank you. And Dana is Communication. She's not here, but I don't believe there's any updates on that subcommittee.
You mean what time? Sorry. What time?
9:15, 9:30 if the room's available. I'll let the committee know.
On what day?
Tuesday the 8th.
Yeah, October 8th.
No. Yeah, I won't be there.
Okay, public comment? The next item on the agenda is superintendent news.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. This is my favorite part of the meeting, as we all know. Just a couple things. We were not able to get the Merrimack teachers here, so I apologize. They're not here, but we will get them here, Mr. Conway. So you received an email from me. It just came to my understanding, and it makes sense, that if someone writes to the PRSD school committee, you do not receive that email. Ms. NAFA actually gets the email. So when I responded, I had just assumed you saw the email. You didn't, but here's the gist of what I was writing to you, or I was writing to those teachers. They had some concerns. There were some teachers in Merrimack, and their concerns were largely based around some programmatic educational programming that they had hoped or that should have been implemented last year, but they were not aware that it was supposed to be implemented last year. And in addition to that, we have 3 big initiatives this year. We have, as we know, Infinite Campus that everyone's doing district-wide. We have the iReady Common Assessments, and then standards-based grading. You recall last year, standards-based grading, that was a group of teachers, 2 teachers from each school got together. And they talked about what they wanted it to look like, and that's an Infinite Campus. So for those teachers in particular, not knowing some of the initiatives that were supposed to be put in last year, And having these three piled on was overwhelming. However, Mr. Conway and I both had conversations with some representatives from all the schools already, trying to just take some of the burden off of their shoulders, specifically with standards-based grading. And we're doing that right now. So that's why my response was written the way it was, just about, we're working with the teachers on this, and this is something where we're seeing more of that, things that they should have known about, that our leadership should have taken care of, it did not. So that, of course, as you all know, is the process of being corrected. So that was that piece of information. I wanted to make sure I shared that with you. Up on the screen, while everything else in the world goes on, Pentucket is, we are formalizing our branding, right? So we know that if you go to a store, there's been Philadelphia P, we've seen Purdue P used, we've seen a whole bunch of different P's used that represent Pentucket. So we're going to go on and standardize. We're using Varsity Brand as the company. They also work with BSN and Varsity, BSN, and one other company is there. But anyways, so we've had a lot of feedback from principals and athletic director, just some insights as to it's been around for 2 months. So here are the three options we're going to send out. I just wanted you to see these. So option A is old classic P. I tend to be a traditionalist when it comes to letters, so that's like if you had the 1950s or 60s college sweater, you get the Pentucket P on it. That's what that is. We have this next one, which is, it's obviously more P's, it's not the fancy of it. This one has a little more action to it. So it's a little more updated, and kind of the guidelines we gave them was we wanted something, we are not hey, we want to do super fancy. We tend to be more of a traditional community, so I want it to be relatively traditional. So there's that P, and that's option D, and then option C is just a very simple P right there. So those are going to be the three options we're going to send out. That's going to be the primary logo for Pentucket. They're also going to redo the seal. You may or may not know this, but we do not have any digital files of the seal. They do not exist. So if we wanted to get for a podium, like an emblem, we don't have the ability to do that. We don't have a high resolution file of any type. So they're going to redo that for us, and then there will be an historically accurate station, which will also get used at some point periodically, but it will be historically accurate, and of course, that will all come back. But these are the three that are going to be going out there. Hopefully this week, and we're going to send them out obviously to all students, and we'll also have them to parents, teachers, everyone can go out and vote. But I think it's important to get that out in the community because, as we know, as an alum, I probably want to have a little bit of say in this as well. So we'll take the tallies, and whatever the will of the people is, it shall be.
Emily?
Is that for like just the uniforms for the sports teams, or is this to be included for any like PTO, PTA?
Good question.
Stuff?
It's such a good question. So we are trying to just standardize all together. That with Pentucket, this is the P. If you go to Georgetown, she's fabulous at getting equipment and things like that for us. And I'll give her, we'll control these. She'll have access to these so she can make things up. And they'll also, BSN will have its online store. But the idea is for the P will exist. The P for Pentucket is the P for Pentucket, kind of like the, what do you know, that the Northwestern P is the Northwestern P, the Northeastern P, N.
I was
Northwestern
like,
N. The Northwestern N is the Northwestern N, the Northeastern N is the, the N, the red and the black.
Carolina C.
The Carolina, the N and the C, absolutely, although there's, some people do variations. But yes, it is to standardize across the board. And for athletics, that's a great point. We standardized our colors already. It's dark green and white. Those are the colors. They've always been the colors.
But this isn't necessarily going to require all new uniforms
No.
for everybody.
No. So Coach Mack actually came to me and goes, look, I don't want to order these uniforms. I said, Coach, go ahead and do it. Any new uniforms we do, we'll start putting out there. And the expectation is when it's a club that goes out, band, where, it doesn't matter who it is that's going out, when they step into an auditorium, when they step into on a field, you know you're playing Pentucket. You're not guessing who's in this
Is
shade
it
of green
Manchester?
or who's wearing the black with the white lettering. So that's the whole concept behind that. So there's that bit of information with the letter Ps. Ben, I'm sorry, I'll get to you eventually, but.
No worries.
So we also have, Brad Dorr and I have been going around to the different selectmen meetings, doing a presentation for them, just updating them on the building project. We've already gone to West Newbury, and last night we were in Groveland. We'll be going to Merrimack. Town meeting in Merrimack is October 21st or 22nd. It will be actually presenting before town meeting takes place. Overall, the response has been very positive. There's a couple images that we have that shows the steel up with the different layers, and that makes it a very real building for folks. And I also share with them, we have the May vote, and here we are now in October. It seems like a long lag, but I talked to them about all the work that has to get done and all the detail that has to get done, not to mention Mr. LeBrecq working with all the finance directors of each of the towns to come together so we can put out our the bond. And when I mentioned to them the bond rate, the bond percentage of 2.62, which is 0.13 lower than what we were going around talking about, so they're all very happy with that, and the $3.25 million in premium, so they're all very happy about that. So overall, that response has been very positive. The final thing I have to talk about, we continue to work very closely with our state representatives, and you probably have heard about the Student Opportunity Act, the $1.5 billion of additional funds coming in. I cannot make this clear enough for everyone at this table. Chapter 70 money, there's nothing there is going to help. We are going to be held harmless at $30 per student, unless an amendment increases it. And that, compared to any North Shore school district, is the smallest percentage increase of all schools. So Triton will also get a $30 increase, but their budget is not as big, so it's a bigger percentage. So we're not going to get help there. However, at the North Shore Superintendent's Roundtable, the representatives were very clear that, and it was obvious, they listened and heard what we had to say. We had 3 representatives, and 1 senator, and an aide that were there. The big takeaways for us, or the potential takeaways, are going to be fully funding circuit breaker is one of their primary things at 75%, which would be tremendous. Which subject to appropriation. You saw that with that quote in the paper, if you saw that. And the language that came back, of course, had subject to appropriation. We're wary of that. But the big piece of this legislation would be the increases or the initial payment back for special education transportation. So fiscal year 22, it's slated to be at 25% for 21, it's 25%, for 22 would be 50%, then 75%, then at 100%. For students who have already met circuit breaker, that would be funded. So that has the potential to add, we don't know exactly because, again, subject to appropriation, but if you look on it, it's probably about $200,000.
Yeah, give or take a few bucks about that.
So
We spend a lot on transportation.
we spend a whole lot. I think it's right around $900,000 is what our special ed transportation is for.
Basically, our special ed transportation this year is going to be about the same as the yellow buses.
Yep, it's horrific. And, there's amendments that were put in on Friday trying to increase circuit breaker to 80%. So regional transportation is fully funded in this. We expected it would be. So overall, the Student Opportunity Act is a step in the right direction because it's addressing an issue that hurts every single school district, and that is special education costs. And North Shore Superintendent is going to continue just to focus in on that when it comes down to budget. We're going to continue to meet with our representatives just to educate them on what the actual expenses are for special education. Because at the end of the day, our three Pentucket towns are paying more and more, a higher percentage each year of the budget, as the state pays less and less. So just, those are my updates. I apologize for being wrong, but I think it's now up to, we go to our student rep, Mr. Ben Boley.
Thank you. So today was the Reed's Rebels Day. We talked about it in the last meeting. A lot of students were wearing orange in support of that, which is very cool to see. Fall sports are going well. Football versus Hamilton Wenham on Saturday was 28-22 Pentucket, and field hockey won yesterday against Amesbury 4-0. That's it.
That was the first gold,
First gold.
it was called the Gold Cup. The
Gold
Game.
Cup. Gold. It was a gold game.
Yep.
It was in the paper.
Thank you. Okay, so under new business, the first item on the agenda is capital plan.
Yes, we have tonight with us a very special guest, our Director of Facilities, Mr. Greg Haddon. He's going to talk about, so this is every time we bring a director, principal, administrator up here, just to talk to you about kind of their areas. This is a particularly important one because you all represent your respective Pentucket towns, and he's going to go over what he does each year and what we're legally required to do. So when you're in your towns and you hear about your elementary school and why is the school not picking up X, Y, and Z, he's going to answer all of those questions. Try to, yes.
Good evening. So, we have the FY '20 capital plan document. I think it's in the light of this, the middle school and the high school make a list. We take them off. We're just doing Band-Aids and duct tape to keep the place going. Two are off the list, and the two big. So it leaves us the four elementaries, and I'll just go through some of the items quickly so you can see it. Bagnell, working with Groveland has been great, the town of Groveland. They've done a lot of work this last summer. They abated asbestos floor tile in four classrooms. And we've chosen the next four classrooms to run through with Bagnell, and they're listed on this document. And again, the cost is an estimate, but we're pretty good with these estimates because we've had a lot of experience. We're also requesting an ADA handicap lift within the school on the inside. There's a couple of stairs down by the kindergarten room that need to be a transition. Instead of a long ramp or walking all the way around the school, we're just requesting that there's a lift. And they've got some estimates. And the way they define a capital project is kind of vague, all languages in a legal document, but it's anything that has a valuation of over $10,000 and a life expectancy of like greater than 5 years. That's the category. So when a project gets to that scale, we try to highlight it and let the town know. Fire alarm system is something that all the fire chiefs have asked us for in the past. All the fire alarm systems are old. Even the Page system, which is new, is actually old. But when you look at a smoke detector in a room like this, you have 50 smoke detectors on one circuit. Think of your house with one light switch, 50, right? So when there's a smoke issue or a fire alarm issue, when you walk up to the panel, it doesn't tell you where to go. It says, check the east side of the building. Now you're hunting this problem. So one of the new features in the fire alarm is to have addressable smoke detectors, where each one has a detector thinking right now. And there's also a feature that the fire chiefs have been asking for, carbon monoxide detector. And it's nice to have, it's a great thing to have, but it's not law, it's not required. But since they've asked for it, I put it back in the capital plan. And whenever you get into a fire alarm upgrade, you just get this one. I'll talk to that in a few minutes. We try to look ahead a couple of years, how things are progressing, the condition of things. So like, I'll go all 3 years. If we go all further than that, it's hard to guess what they might need to start. But we try to push things out, let them know what's hot, highlight these things for them. But working with Groveland, they're proactive, they're investing in the school. And you'll see a couple of pictures and building maps point out some of these projects. Moving on to Sweetser. Sweetser did get a new roof in 2012, but they didn't do one section of the school. The walkway as you enter the school. And it's still applicated, it's all the time, so that's on the list. Again, we talk about the fire alarm upgrade at Sweetser. That's an old system. And we've had some estimates on how to bring that system up to new standards. A lot of the public safety officials would love to have cameras. There are cameras here at the high school, cameras at the school. Bagnell has a nice camera system. So the schools that don't have cameras would put it into the capital plan to be considered. And these are more exterior cameras that look at the parking lot, look at the entrance road, fire alarm. So in that video feed would be recorded, and it would also go straight to the police. They had to respond. A good part of Sweetser has been remediated. The second grade wing is newer, so the floor tiles are fine. The first grade wing still has the hallways and cafeteria that have 9-inch asbestos for it. It's in pretty good shape. It's got 150 posts wax on it, so I don't think we can get to the tile until it's all wax. But it should be abated in the future because it crumbles. So that's on the list for the date remaining Sweetser. And we also talk about restroom upgrades. You see that now. A lot of these restrooms are just 30, 40 years old. The equipment is old, and it could use a significant renovation, new fixtures, new plumbing, new tile. So we put it on there. Moving on to Donahue. Donahue has a couple of things that maybe the Merrimack folks highlight to the finance committee. One thing that is a problem at the Donahue school is the windows. The exterior windows of the school are wood framed. You might see a nice white window with a cladding on the outside, either a fiberglass or an aluminum cladding. But the interior of that window is wood. It's crumpled. We found about 15 windows going into the wood of the driveway, which are kind of, we've replaced 4 of them. And they're good size, they're about this size. So, window replacement is $1,000. But the entire school has this style window, so I've brought this to the town's attention. I know they're thinking of it, but they could possibly pursue assistance from the MSBA to the window, like we have done at the back now. That's something significant. Most of the floors at Donahue have been repaired. Took care of that 8 years ago. But there's still a few spots, the stairways, the stairwell, water on the stairs. And you just can't fix them because they're as asbestos content. Camera system at Donahue, fire alarm upgrade. Pretty much, Donahue could also use boilers. The boilers that are there work. They're 20 years old. They're at the end of their expected life. We service them, they work. But we're going to put them on the list. One opportunity that we offered to Merrimack was the boilers that are currently installed in the middle school. They're relatively new, 4 years old, and they're going to be demolished. So we brought Merrimack down, take a look at the boilers, basically work out a financial arrangement, much cheaper than new. Just take these boilers and install them in front. But it was a significant cost to remove them, transport them, and reinstall them. So I'm not sure what the long-term plan is, but we did have a less expensive solution to the cost. So now the city of Haverhill is interested in cable price. We're trying to work with that. Because the equipment is in great shape, and it should be reused in some of these times. It's just not quite big enough to do that. So that's it for Donahue.
could you explain that a little bit more? Because I've seen the visuals.
And it's a great thing.
Yes.
So what they do, again, West Newbury's proactive, aggressive. Each year we pick an area that's, you can see it, the floor has contamination, bricks and valleys, and it has a little spring to it. So we abate it, there's asbestos in that, and then they cut it all out with sausage, they remove all the steel, they open up the floor, and you're looking down at the floor level. And then we piece in a new piece of steel, wire mesh, concrete, skin flow, blue tile, stick. About to do an area of, within these tables, and that's about the size of the hallway in the area we take. This is about a $50,000 repair. We do one every year, and they keep coming because it's a 100-year-old house. But they're investing in it, and we've picked projects for the next couple of years in different areas. Page fire alarm is, you see, you walk up to the panel is brand new, beautiful, simplex panel. Problem is, everything downstream from the panel, every smoke detector, every pull station, every horn, strobe, is like 1970 vintage. So we've been working extensively with Simplex and the town of West Newbury to upgrade the fire alarm system to get it up to where it should be. The estimate came in about 3 weeks ago, and it was $280,000. Significant project. But, you know, they have all the data, they have the engineering documents. It's up to them to figure out how to do that. And, on the outside of the page, is this, concrete trim. So when you walk up to the building, you'll see a brick wall. You'll see a concrete lintel. And you can call it out just like that green awning that runs the roof. The concrete lintel is crumbling, so we've got a survey to see how extensive the damage is, what's causing it, water infiltration, freeze thaw, plus it's 100 years old. So there is a plan in here to fix the lintel. We've already fixed 3 of them. But, you know, this chunk of concrete falling 30 feet in the air onto the side of the building could really hurt. So we've addressed the loose ones, but there's still probably 40 or 50 spots. So again, another $250,000 job. But, so we hand this in every year. Sometimes it's like kicking a can down the road, and other times people read this and have questions and want to know the significance of the problem. And I'd be happy to take it for a walk with you. Our requirement is to highlight things that you see and hand it in and try to get the best of the stuff. It worked for the high school.
Yes.
I had a nice for that.
Yeah. So I think one of the parts that Greg just does, I think you all know he does an amazing job. And I think the two Gregs have worked very well together in addressing a lot of our big issues over the past years. But one of the things that I think is important to take away, so Greg, his crew, the facilities, the maintenance folks in each building, they know that building inside and out. We don't own those buildings, that elementary. So when they see things, we go and we report, we take an inventory of what the big issues are, and then we inform the towns. And what they decide to do with that is up to them. Greg and I have actually talked about just going, the two of us, to some of the selectmen meetings and saying, hey, you know, you've got this list, just want to let you know, these are the big issues. Obviously, their budgets are tight as well, but that heads up on some of the big ticket items. It's good for them to have so that they can plan and set money aside to address those issues. Because some of them, I think the classic is always going to be the fire panels, right? When you're trying to connect a new panel to an old panel, it doesn't work out well. So trying to go through a building that was 100 years old plus and rewire it there's very significant cost to it. So those are always the challenges.
Greg, when do we have to get these to the town's capital improvement committees? Is it by October 15th? It just stuck in my head.
Each year it's about this time. I usually prepare it for October 1st, give it a date. School committee gets to look at it, forward it on to the town.
Okay.
And then what happens?
I want to make sure we make that deadline, that's all I want to forget. With all the other stuff going on, we don't want to miss too many of those deadlines. Okay. Put
Thank
down
you.
my memory sheet to do that.
Questions? Rita?
Did I hear correctly that some of the floors at the page were made out of wallboard?
It's
Gypsum.
a lightweight concrete, but it's equivalent to gypsum, sheet rock.
Yeah,
But the technical name is gypcrete because of its thickness.
okay. Yeah, you said it was 2 inches?
Yeah, so that,
2 or 3 inches.
so the pictures of it, when they start breaking up, it looks like it's just rebar, mesh rebar, and then the gypsum on the top.
Yeah, this is joists, and then there's this fabric, metal fabric between the joists, and they fill that with gypsum. And over time, the wear and tear, of people walking on it, the moisture, cracks, crumbles. Bagnell's roof, the roof of the Bagnell school is gypsum.
No kidding.
Oh, yeah, I got pictures of that. But, you know,
Well, they covered that one with rubber, though.
it's working its day, it's just not a method to use.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you, Mr. Head.
The next item on the agenda is
Hi, Greg.
update on the contingency plan.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. We brought this up, I think it was the September meeting it came up, the request for me to, well, it might have been August, to look at contingency plan. In the 2019 contingency plan, we started looking at the 30% values. We talked about that. And this updated, we're looking less at the value because we know what the values are already. The big changes, if you look at Bagnell, the reason why Bagnell doesn't have a capacity is because when we're doing contingency, it's a significant problem. So let's go with the most realistic of situations. The high school heating system fails in the winter. Okay. So Bagnell in that situation, while they might have spaces that are designated for special, that used 2 or 3 times a day, or before and after school program, like the gym, yeah, that's going to have to become classroom space. So we don't have a full capacity there because we don't know if we want to turn that into 2 classrooms or 3 classrooms. Greg had and I talk about that. But essentially the plan that you had from last year was modified specifically the middle school. So now we have in the middle school last year, everything was going to, each elementary school becomes a pre-K through 8, which would be true. But all the SPED programs that we now have in the middle school, those will go to Page. And they will need about 12 classrooms at Page to make that happen. And again, yeah, this is hey, it's a situation, we have to deal with it. This is what we're going to do to take care of it. And then also the other adjustment was over at Sweetser. Again, we saw more of a benefit. Last year, we said pre-K through 2nd grade would go to Page. This year, we can do it with just pre-K and kindergarten going to Page and keeping the 1st grade, 2nd grade in the district programs in Merrimack and moving them over to Donahue. We thought that'd be less disruptive for those families, but they do not have the capacity to take on the pre-K and kindergarten as well. So those were the only 2 adjustments that we had to make. But again, it becomes a little bit, space becomes very tight. And as Mr. Haddon said, we don't have those long laundry lists for the high school or middle school for capital improvements anymore. We just have one mega-sized list that says $118 million that we're addressing. But if something does happen, space is going to be tight, and we have the plan here in place to take care of it. And he just went over with you, which I'm glad this ties in, the issues that are at each school. Overall, Merrimack, the schools in Merrimack are in good shape aside from those boilers. Bagnell is in good shape aside from its electrical issues, and they're always doing abatements. And Page, yes, I don't know what to say other than that. It's a very old building that does not have this, aside from the tiles. You don't have asbestos in walls or anything like that, so that's wonderful. But it has its other challenges of being 4 stories high,
The advantage of building your building before asbestos was invented.
Yes, it's true. That's good. So,
Always positive.
you know, there's silver linings and everything, but as a whole, this is, does anybody have any questions about this? It's a draft right now. I didn't want to, obviously didn't want to finalize it, but this seems to make the most sense still. You know, long-term plan, we've talked about that in the past as well, that we'll go forward with one of those. I will come to you first and we can have that discussion. And in the regional agreement, we adapted that to say, if at one point one of the Pentucket towns didn't feel comfortable with us moving with that, they have that option to bring it up, and we can have that, the three towns can have that conversation. But optimal education option, that is just flat out reality. Not ideal from a parent perspective, but from a teaching and student perspective, fabulous. But if you're not going to push that, just mention.
Can you remind us what timeline would constitute short-term versus
Yeah.
long-term?
So,
I mean, 'cause I feel like now we have an
Sure.
actual timeline
Sure.
as to for how long this
So,
particular building needs to defer.
let's go with the January, because it seems like everything here in high school happens to right around January, February, and March. So that would be short term. But if we had something happen right now, we would start out short term. And if it ended up being that we couldn't make a repair this year, and it might be a longer repair, we might go there in the long term. If there's something like catastrophic failure here at the high school where, so you can't really say heating, because if the heat goes, we can bring in an exterior supply to hook up to our system, maybe. So it depends. But if there was like a roof collapse or something like that here, and there is no fear of a roof collapse here, but if there were, that's too much damage. We're gonna go into we'll start off in short term until we've got everything finalized, then we'll go to long term.
So you would consider making a change to the long-term plan even in the middle of a school year, even if it was something like regionalizing by grade in the middle of a school year?
So if it happened today, it'd be a conversation we'd all have. I'm not gonna make that decision. I think it's worth an open public comment.
Right, but I mean, it would be a consideration.
Yep. You know, there's a lot of moving pieces on that. It's not
For
just,
sure.
yeah.
No, and
Yes, I would.
we are not,
Yeah. If it's gonna be something that's going to take a really long repair on this building and people get displaced all over, it's, you know, for the, you know, students first always, that's number one pillar. So when we're looking at the educational, which is our responsibility to provide an optimal education, that's what this contingency plan does. It optimizes education. There's certainly inconveniences, longer times on buses, but in terms of the education, it would be solid.
Any other questions? I'm not seeing any. The next item on the agenda is class size breakdown by grade.
Yes, Mr. Conway missed last meeting, but Mr. Hodges has brought up one of the class numbers. So we actually don't have those today. One of the reasons being that today, October 1st, is the official finalized number for when you have all the enrollments. But Ms. Funk is actually working on getting all of those for us. So we should have those for you at the October 15th meeting.
Great,
There'll be
thank
a
you.
breakdown of everything.
Also haven't heard from our neighboring school districts, so we asked who they send here. They don't fill that form out real quick.
So we'll add that onto the October 15th meeting
Yep,
agenda.
absolutely.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is specialist schedules.
Sure.
Mr. Connor, would you like to speak on that?
Be happy to address it. I know some questions came up about what the elementary specialist schedules look like, and what the schedules look like for the specialist teachers as well. And we're referring to specialist teachers, I think we refer to them as sort of the elective-oriented or allied arts, however we want to sort of refer to them. So when we realigned the structures and so forth, our kindergarten through third grade students weekly have a PE class, an art class, a music class, a library class, and they have a second art class which is working in a different medium than the first one. So it's a different curriculum per week. The intent of that is not to work on something on Tuesday and continue it on Thursday. that they'll have a different medium that they would work in. Okay. And then for our 4, 5, and 6 grade levels, every student would have a PE, an art, and a STEAM. And then we would plan for music and global language, unless a student in 4, 5, or 6 was in band or orchestra, in which case they would have an instrumental lesson in place of their music class, and then an ensemble practice in place of their global language class. And that's how we planned that out. And we implemented it that way. And then we had students, and we implemented it and staffed it according to rollover of instrumental signups from the previous year for grades 5 and 6, and expected enrollment for 4th grade for instruments just sort of based on a 2 or 3 year trend. And then as we get into it, students began to sign up for instruments, and I think some savvy 5th and 6th graders figured out that, well, maybe I don't want to take music and global language class, so I can sign up for an instrument. So they started signing up a little bit later than we had anticipated, and that caused a lot of ripples because we did not staff it with the expectation that so many students in 6th grade would all of a sudden be very interested in playing the flute. So we had to make some adjustments to that, which we were able to do, but we did have to cut it off. And it also provided us with an indication that we need to consider how we do our instrument signups, whether we do it in June, the year before, and we allow a short window in September, but also cap it that if you don't sign up by a certain point, that's it. You can't sign up after that. And once you sign up and you're in, you have to stay in for the year because we no longer have room for you in the other classes. We can't, your whole schedule gets worked around that because that's how we staffed it. So we were able to make some adjustments, and there were maybe a period of time where in the first 2 weeks of school, maybe a student didn't have a PE class on their schedule in the first 2 weeks of school, but we were able to figure those out to make sure that everyone had their PE, art, and STEAM, or STEM, and then the music and global language were backfilled with the instrumental ensembles. And that's the way the specialists set up for everyone. And if there is a 1 or 2 student sort of exception based on sort of a music, an instrumental sign up, we guaranteed they had PE. We had a couple scenarios, I know in Merrimack, where a student did end up in the global language class, but not the art class. And they signed up for their instrument late, and we just could not put, and it wasn't that we don't have enough teachers for the instrumental, it was that when you flipped it around, we only planned for 1 or 2 sections rather than 3 sections of the music and global language. And then the art and STEM, where some classes had 25 kids in it, and then another one had 16 over here because the numbers that played with it was not. It's not the intent. So it's all caused by how and when we do the instrumental signups. So we will certainly reconsider how we do the instrumental signups moving into next year. I think Mr. Guerrero is committed to figuring out a good process to make sure that we do that in a fair and timely way. So not all that different than what we would do for students registering for classes at the middle school or high school, for instance, and doing it in the springtime. And I think your other questions that came up were around the specialist teachers and their schedules. And what I can tell you is every specialist teacher is provided with a 45-minute prep period per day. Additionally, if they travel during the day, so if they travel from one building to the other, and we tried not to have them travel as much as possible, but if they do, they get an additional travel block of time to travel. They all have a 25-minute lunch, which is their contractual obligation. And then the specialists to get additional planning during the week, so they have anywhere from a double to a triple block of time, one time during the week, which allows them for sort of the continuity of their curriculum planning. They have to plan for multiple grade levels, and now they're in multiple buildings as well. So we work with them to give them that additional block of time that extends beyond what we're sort of contractually obligated to have, but we felt like it was a good sort of happy place in the middle to allow them to make the adjustments. So, they have the same, they have equitable prep time among them in their, we tried to balance of which classes balance it all out, it's equitable. And they have equitable to the classroom teachers, and in some situations, maybe even a little bit more. But based on because they have travel time included. Travel time is sort of this lost block of time, right? So it's neither class teaching time, and it's not prep time. But if the teacher has to travel, we have to give them that block of time. And when we have these systematic schedules like this, we can't give them just 20 minutes of travel time. They get 45 minutes of travel time because we can't start a class, we just have to follow the schedule. So, and that's just the way it works.
It's a very important concept. That was a challenging one to kind of, for me to start to wrap my head around, but it makes sense. So if everything's based off 45 minutes, you can't give someone, like you said, 20 minutes to get from A to B because there's still 25 minutes left in that period and they're in the middle of the class.
So the specialist schedule looks like a period schedule, much like the middle school, high school.
I want to weigh in on it.
Briefly, can you give me a possible origin why it's out there that it was being said that they weren't getting equity among of their time off, etc.? Is it something that was fixed once it was out there, or is it something that really snowballed when somebody made a comment? Do you have an idea?
Yeah, I mean, it's possible in the first day or two of school that there were some adjustments to the schedules that need to be made, kind of like what I just described to you happened with those registrations. So that may have contributed to some of it.
We had that beginning where the blocks, first periods, so one school starts at 8:30, other schools start at 8:30.
Different start times, yeah.
So because of the different start times, everyone was on the same schedule. But that created a problem because if I started at 8:35, and that's what was on my schedule, the other school started at 8:30, so the kids had 5 minutes to be with their homeroom teacher, and the homeroom teacher walked them down. And if the 8:35 school didn't have that 5 minutes, so that was an adjustment that had to be made as well.
Well, I'm happy and satisfied, but are you aware that the people that were slightly disgruntled, are they satisfied now that things are equitable with them?
I have not heard any more issues in the last 2 or 3 weeks. We did in the first couple of weeks,
And you'd
I
probably
have
do
not
that.
heard anything since.
I would say, if I'm one of those teachers, I love the school I was at. That's why they do this. So it's very challenging to all of a sudden get me up to move. I know I heard there was concern of I now have all these kids from 2 different buildings, and I don't know them as well as I knew. That's true. That's absolutely true, and that's kind of one of the negative sides of them moving. I mean, the flip side, and what Mr. Conway said, is still interesting, that even with the travel time in the classes taught, they still have some additional time prep, and that's with folks traveling. So I don't know how to, so it's a good trade-off, but again, if I had my druthers and I could have been in one school, that'd be great, but there is in no way do we have the ability to fill one full-time in any one of our schools for anyone.
My understanding, if it wasn't equitable, and it wasn't fixed, then the union president would come forward.
He will.
Know about these inequalities that need to be addressed.
Yeah, and I think, so Mr. Went and I meet every other week, and this certainly would be something that he would bring up to my attention. And when I'll be making my rounds, October, November, sometime the end of this month or start of next, just going around, but I know that it's heartbreak so if I had to go, in my world, when I was teaching at Pentucket, if I had to go between Pentucket and Amesbury, I don't want to go to Ames. Why would I want to go to Amesbury? I just want to stay at Pentucket. And I think that's something that I can certainly understand, and that's their equivalency. So it's hard, and I don't think that's something that gets corrected in 1 month in terms of the feeling about the kids, but it will take some time. I think that's definitely one of the big
Thank you.
challenges.
Emily?
So I have a comment and 2 questions. I'm going to say the comment first. So I think it's also not just like, oh, I loved the elementary school that I was at before, but learning how the culture of the different schools
Good point.
works
Great
and
point.
feeling like they're truly part of a community. Because teaching can be a really isolating job. You're generally the only adult in a room with a bunch of younger people. And when you are, whether it's between days or during one day, traveling from a building to a building, that there's not just like code shifting that goes on, but there's like a sense of community. And that is something that I have some concerns about, the impact on our staff's social and emotional well-being, I guess. Nothing like specific, just that
Yeah,
I
definitely.
know how hard that can be. And also, not just that they are getting to know a whole new set of kids, but that they might not have those same students next year, at least, and this is probably specific, no, it is specific to Bagnell, but we have 2 different PE teachers. So the PE teacher that my boys happen to both have the same one this year, they might have her next year, they might not. And I think that from the teacher's perspective, when you're getting to know a student so that you can best meet their needs, even in the specialist areas, in fact, maybe particularly because you don't see them as often, to say, oh, well, next year I might not see you, but then I might see you again, is very challenging. And, you know, again, putting the kids first, is that what's best for these kids when special areas may be an area of struggle for them? So those are my comments. My questions are, why are there different elementary school start times?
The bus.
Is it a bus issue?
Yep.
And are there passing times in the elementary school schedules? That just popped into my,
Yeah.
our
So-
elementary school has
So
that.
these specialists
And-
don't, so they're, you know,
Yeah.
one art class ends at
Yeah.
I don't know, 9 o'clock, and the next one starts at 9 o'clock, and there is not passing time built into the schedules for the elementary schools. We could not do
So
7 blocks per day. if
just
we included
devil's
that.
advocate, it may be something we want to look at going forward, because one of the things from Bill's memo from our last meeting, to me, implied that the specialists like didn't have time to run to the restroom between their classes, essentially. And when you've got 7 back-to-back different blocks of kids, that's
But they don't.
So,
So-
but you know what I, like, I mean,
Sure.
you know, in our elementary school, we schedule passing time, so there are 2 minutes between, which isn't a lot, but it's enough time to do your business.
Now, you as a classroom teacher,
I do not get passing time, but when I drop my special, so I drop my kids off at art at 1:12, and my K1 team meeting starts at 1:14. So, when, you know, lunch ends at 11:36 and math starts at 11:38. So that time for any interventionists and other people is built in, because I don't have to go anywhere.
No.
So it's not built in for me, it's built in for the people, the reading specialists or whoever, that have to get from X to Y.
So they don't travel necessarily, but so they don't teach 7 blocks in a day. They'll have, because they'll have a prep period, they'll have a
Right.
lunch period, and often they have another period. There are a few occasions where they're teaching 5 or 6 in a day, but that's the same as the classroom teacher.
Yeah, no, I'm not
There's
disagreeing that
equity.
equity-wise, I'm
Yep.
just saying that, you know, if you've got, because it was my understanding that I read somewhere that some of them do have 7 classes in one day.
Not true.
And that, you know, so if that's broken up by your lunch and maybe a prep, depending on how it's broken, like that could still be 3 classes back to back.
Yep.
And just having a moment to breathe before you had, you know, 22 kindergartners and then 22 first graders, and then like that's, you know, sometimes that
Yep.
2 minutes is sanity.
so I think for us, one of the other important things is, we said this at the beginning, we'll say this all along, we are very open to, when this goes through, getting their feedback, finding it's good,
100%.
and then, and even along, like, if we have to adjust, then we make those adjustments, because it's us doing this for the first time, and we're absolutely open to that. I know the option that I know for certain, or I would suspect teachers don't want to do, if, you know, the really clean way to do this is to have a set at each school and not have full-time, have to be a .5 or .6. But I don't think that's I would hate that for those folks, and I don't think they'd like that either.
Yeah, no, I just think that some of the concerns that I've heard about, as well as things that I know and have experienced going forward, we might try to see, you know, what are the biggest concerns that people have brought forward, and how can we best address those
Yep.
for next year, because
Yeah, we'll do it middle.
the
like, we'll make
kids
it-
are
yeah.
first, but in order for the kids to be taught their best,
Happy
we
teachers,
need
happy
happy
kids.
teachers. And I take the, mental, the social emotional health for teachers very seriously.
Any questions?
I'm just kind of curious when you talked about it, those extra 12 to 14 minutes that they build in, does that become a longer start and stop time for the school day? Or do they take that out of the instruction part in the middle?
During our day,
Well, you get 2 minutes between each class where ours go bump, 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 right against
how is
each
it
other.
counted, like in the white paper? I'd have to,
I'm just saying, does your school start and then 15 minutes more than ours do?
start at
Or-
8:15 and we dismiss at 2:55. So the kids can come in at 8,
So
they're
you st-
late at 8:25.
So you start
that's-
earlier than we do?
Yes, but instructional time doesn't start till 8:25. That's like that 10-minute, we're on duty.
Yeah.
So I think,
You see what I'm thinking?
yeah, so it's adding the time
To the day?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I appreciate that you're gonna look at this.
Well, well, we'll-
See if everybody's needs to be met.
Yep, and every time, so I think Mr. Conway's been, well, I know Mr. Conway's been very responsive at that first couple days when we ran that 8:30, 8:35. That was an adjustment we had to make. The first principals meeting, we got feedback from the principals, so there were adjustments that were made. So we're constantly taking the feedback, because obviously you want to do what's best for kids, and if they're losing their minds, then we need to find a way to ease that up as well, so.
And you can report back to us at that point?
Any big changes, yeah.
Okay, thanks. Next item on the agenda is accountability.
Yes, so I'll just warm up Mr. Conway. We've had an interesting year last year, right? Where there's a lot of focus on aligning the curriculum to what the Massachusetts frameworks are. And with that was a new math and English language arts. Did everybody here see my video? We didn't see the video.
Well done.
Thank you. It was a first take too. But essentially, the video kind of summarized. We were at so again, just an overview. The state sets a target for us, and the target for us is different than the target for Amesbury. It's different than the target for Georgetown, Hamilton, Wenham, Linfield, Triton. It's different. Our target, we might only be, last year we were 54% of the way towards our target. But our target could have been here. Another district's target, they might have been 80% of the way, but their target might be down here. So you cannot equate progress on target towards achievement. It's not the same thing. It's the state looking at you as a district and saying, hey, you're doing what you're supposed to do, you're making some progress. In our instance, when we break it down on the scores, there's MCAS, the area of biggest growth by far was in math. And that propelled us from 54% towards our goal to 75%. It's a 1 year gain of 21 percentage points towards our goal. That's a pretty big jump. But you can see it. You can see it in the breakdown. You can get 4 points. You get 4 points for non-high school students on math. You get 4 points for the lowest performing students. That's a maximum point. So, and we were previously at 0s and 1s in those categories. Now we're at 3s and 4s, mostly 4s, 4 out of 4. And that's simply with alignment. Now we were absolutely anticipating, once things were aligned, that we would see maybe a small bump, but certainly not to that extent. I think another important thing to, we can get to this more detail later, but there's, up on the DESE website, you can go on, you can compare our district to similar districts, and you can't, they don't do a district-to-district comparison, they will do what they actually do on the darts, but they will do a school breakdown, so you can select a school, and you can look at a DART report. A DART report goes ahead and says, okay, this is how many students met or exceeded your projections, and it takes just, we'll say the high school, and it compares Pentucket Regional High School to other high schools that have very similar demographics, similar SES, similar student populations. And then there's a total of 10 schools that are listed there that are in your comparison. Um, at the high school, we pretty much fell in the middle for both math and language arts. In the elementaries, we were last. In 9th or 10th, we were either second to last or last in both language arts and math across the board. So we are not going out there and broadcasting that last year. That was last year's. We don't have the 2019 darts, but I know because we increased 21% towards our goal, we're not going to be last anymore. And that is simply aligning the curriculum. And that's not saying that teachers were not doing their work, they weren't putting in effort. They absolutely were. It's just what was being taught was not necessarily aligned with what the state was expecting them, the students to learn. So that simple alignment makes that big difference. And, you know, obviously I look at this through the lens of a superintendent. I'm a parent as well. So, you know, when I see those numbers, I think that's important. And it's not about, I had a teacher made a comment that we seem to be focusing a little bit more on testing. I have said to you repeatedly, when this principal's been up here talking about the great things, how does that get evaluated on MCAS? And they just laugh and say, well, it's not. Because we do amazing things that aren't tested. And I am one person, I do not particularly care for testing. However, I am a fan of accountability. You all hold me accountable. I hold Mr. Conway accountable. Accountability is a really important piece. So when we see those numbers of where things are, we need to make moves. We need to take some action. And this was not something that Mr. Conway and I just said, hey, this is what we're doing. I think Ms. Kelly and Dr. Mulqueen both saw that that was an area that needed to be done, and that's how they started developing this whole curriculum that we implemented and the teachers took on last year. Because it was pretty obvious. Even if you talk to the new assistant principals that come in, it's interesting. Our perspectives coming from the outside and in to seeing what's being done, what's not being done. So it's a huge, just like we're talking about the specialists, it's been a big task for those teachers to take on, and they've done an extremely good job delivering that curriculum, and they've been very uncomfortable doing it, but they've worked on it, and the goal ultimately is for that to just be the norm of what we do, and then they can even now we use the term that they have autonomy within the curriculum as long as it's aligned. You have the autonomy to pick and make it fun, make it engaging, and that's really where we want to be. And I think past year was a great step in that direction. So I'm going to stop talking, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Conway.
So as we talked about MCAS scores last year, we sort of did it in two parts, and we'll do that similarly. I'll show you the accountability. That's just the public accountability page. It's on the Department of Ed's website, but we'll just sort of highlight some of the points that Dr. Bartholomew was mentioning and sort of explain that document. We'll look at the district, and then we'll look at each school's accountability. We're not going to get in today to the actual performance, the percentage of performance, and then strengths, weaknesses, next steps. We'll do that in the next meeting. So we'll have sort of a very similar PowerPoint to what you saw, or Google Slides to what you saw last year, and we'll break that data down for this year. And the feedback from you last year is that the way we broke that down was helpful, so we'll sort of replicate that, but on this new data. And if there's something different that you want to see that we can add in, we would need to get that feedback probably tonight, so that we can make sure it's prepared for you in 2 weeks from now.
And just one other thing to mention, the students who took this, their families are going to be expecting reports, so there's some...
Yeah. Those reports go home within the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, they'll be, so the middle of the week middle of the month towards the end of the month, those will end up going home. So I just wanted to make sure we got that out there in case you get questions from your constituents.
This is public information. All right. And this is turn this on. This is the Department of Ed's website, and all you have to do is search for Pentucket Schools profile. And there's a lot of information up here, but what you're probably looking for is the assessment and accountability. And the accountability is when the state, as Dr. Bartholomew talked about, it's progress towards the targets that they've set for us, which is different than the achievement. Right? So
you could have a really low achieving school or district that has low performance, but they had a good growth year and their students got better and they met all their targets, so their target scores are very high. And that's good. We want to head in that direction. So we'll look here, and I'll just scroll down a little bit. There's some basic information. But as you look up here, you see overall classification. We used to do, well, we've done a lot of different things over the years, but most recently it's been levels 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. They don't use numbers anymore. Our overall classification would be called not requiring assistance or intervention. And that's the majority of districts would be in Massachusetts, might be in that category. If we had something that was substantially low or consistently low, or there was an area of real concern, it would not say that. The reason for the classification, substantial progress towards targets. So because we continue to make progress, we have no assistance or intervention required.
Mr. Conway, out of curiosity, if we were just looking at 2019, would it be substantial progress towards targets, or would it have been met targets?
So that we can break down, we can look over here. So you can see the overall progress towards improving targets is at a 67%, which indicates substantial progress. As we know, and we learned last year, which I'm sure you all remember, 75 is the actual percentage to say that you met your targets. Well, this number of 67 is taken from a 2-year weighted average. The most recent year is weighted more heavily than the prior year. So if we look in 2018, we only had 54%, as Dr. B referenced earlier. In 2019, though, we did actually have 75%. So if it was based on 1 year, we would have been considered to have met our targets. So we did meet them based on 2019, but when you do that 40-60 weighted average, it brings us to 67%. So we get close. We're getting there. Another year like we had, we will have met or even exceeded our targets. And it breaks it down a little bit further, so you can, this is how we get points, and how those total up. All right? And this column here is all students in grades 3 through 8, so non-high school. Why do they separate high school from 3 through 8? Because there are additional indicators for a high school that they want you to work on. So it's not just MCAS scores. We're also focusing on chronic absenteeism and additional indicators, which is access to advanced coursework. So advanced coursework, additional indicators at 3 through 8 is just in absenteeism or chronic absenteeism. And then over in the high school, it's also advanced coursework, for instance. That's another one. So both chronic absenteeism and advanced coursework. So there's other factors, including high school completion rate. So they also track that. So it's more than just MCAS scores that go into these scores of 75%. But up here, they take our achievement, and then they have our growth. And as Dr. B referenced, you can get 0 points, 1, 2, 3, or 4 points towards any one of these indicators. 3 means you met your actual goal. 4 is you exceeded it. 2 means you made some progress towards it. And these vary depending upon the makeup of the school, depending upon the makeup of a variety of factors. So this is all students in grades 3 through 8. And then the second column are students in 3 through 8 who are our lowest performing 20% of students from the year before. So not necessarily high needs, not necessarily special education, not ELL necessarily, but our lowest performing 20% from the year before. How did they do this year?
Mr. Conway, question. If a school had students who all met or exceeded their expectations, do they still have a 20%, lowest 20%?
They would. Every school and school district has their lowest quintile of students.
Thank you.
And that was what made this system equitable across the state, that it didn't matter that even in the highest performing district in Massachusetts, we're still expecting our students to grow and improve, so that they still get scored on how their lowest quintile did from last year compared to
So the lowest performing students in the non-high school grades is grades 4 through 8, because the third graders didn't have a year prior.
Correct,
Okay.
yes, yep, 4 through 8. And it's in their achievement and growth. So you can see when you start to look at these numbers up here, both in growth and achievement, and this is sort of our MCAS performance and growth, you see a lot of 3s and 4s. And that's how we got to 75%. That's where we did. Also, the high school did well for the most part with graduation numbers. I know a few years ago there was a lot of attention paid to chronic absenteeism, particularly in maybe suburban schools that weren't used to paying attention to those things. And I know even in this district, prior to Dr. Bartholomew and I joining, that was something that many people focused on. Yes, it is factored in. It's also only 10% of the formula versus actual achievement is 67% and growth is 22%. So where do we spend our time and energy? We spend it on where the greatest weight is.
And chronic absenteeism is more than 18 days?
So 10% of the year, so 18 days. So, but if a student enrolled in November, it would be 10% of it. So any student who is absent from school, 10% or more is considered chronically absent. And the reality is, our actual numbers are really low. So fluctuations in those numbers turned into percentages are tough to really sort of focus on.
If we happen to have a community where parents were taking their kids on trips to somewhere in the United States or Europe or Africa, does that count against us?
That would count against us if it exceeded 10% in total. And sometimes the trip itself may not, but combine that with a week to get the flu and another couple days here or there, and now you're at 19, 20 days absent for the year, and that is exceeding 10% of the year, and that your student is considered chronically absent, therefore hurting our account.
I bring that up because that was an actual concern we brought up with DESE, that if you have a population, which we know we do, where parents are taking their children out, we're being penalized for kids going on trips, and they're very educational trips. If I had the opportunity to go to Europe, I'm not going to say no. You take your kid with you. What an education, what an opportunity to see things firsthand. But we are penalized for it.
Well, skiing in the Alps, I wouldn't exactly say is a educational week
Yeah.
vacation.
Depends. You and I could argue on that. If you wanted to send me for an educational PD to the Alps skiing,
I noticed you didn't say Disney World.
I did not. That's true.
You can learn at Disney World.
So you can see the factors that are here that contribute, and we did pretty well. If you scroll down on this page, and you can see how all the numbers sort of average out and get to that 75%. And it was fairly even between high school and non-high school, so 74% at the elementary and middle, 78% at the high school. So pretty even contribution from both parties. And then as you scroll down, you see last year's, for comparison's sake, which was based on 2018's MCAS, and you see a lot of ones and zeros. And that's how we got it. 54%. So, much better. A much better improvement. In particular, the area of math, if we were to look, that was 18, and then in 19, if you look straight across in math, 4, 4, 4, 4, 3, 4, 4, 4. As Dr. D said, that's what made the difference for us. We also made progress in English, in literacy. We have more work to do there. And science was a little bit of a mixed bag, but from year to year. And then the growth scores as well, the growth scores in math were really very strong. And they were pretty good in English too. So we can get into more of the specifics and what it means for us instructionally. We knew we made some decisions last year, particularly around the math at the middle school and high school, advancing on. So that will play into sort of what the next steps are, sort of anticipatory decisions. And a lot of the work we're doing, and I think this is the thing that everyone needs to remember, when we start to implement standards-based instruction, grading, curriculum, you can't do it one little nugget at a time, a piece at a time for teachers and students. You have to give them the bigger picture. but it's a bigger picture work. I think for many of our staff, they really want to be perfectionists. They want everything to go exactly to plan. And that's really hard to do when you're taking on a lot like this. And we're working with them to let them know that this is, one piece at a time here. It doesn't all have to be perfect at once. It's okay. No one is, we're going to support you in doing that. We're not going to tell you you're doing an awful job. None of this is their fault. This is the work that we need to do moving forward, and hoping, I think a lot of people are beginning to understand that, and we just want to continue to make progress with it, and I think this is encouraging.
I'm very encouraged. And I was very discouraged with the 18 results. I mean, it was absolutely embarrassing, the comments I heard from parents. I think we're on the right road, Doc.
Alignment is a big deal, and again, we asked the teachers to take on a big task, and they pulled it off. So they get a lot of credit.
The data does get broken down by school as well, and in addition to the district getting an overall classification, each school gets an overall classification, and all of our schools fell into the category of not requiring assistance or intervention because we're all making substantial progress. Good news. Next time we see each other, we'll dig in a little bit deeper. We'll talk about more specifics of what the positive was, but also maybe some of the areas that weren't as good as we'd like to see them, and what the next steps are.
Great, thank you. The next item on the agenda is the PAT negotiations.
Well, it's me again, Madam Chair. So, as we know, it's that time where the 3-year contract for the PAT is up, and we like to start our negotiations with the PAT, and they very much would like us to start with them as well. So, what I need to know, we need some direction from the school committee as to what format you would like us to use. In the past, my understanding is you've had the superintendent and the business manager go into negotiations with the union. You might decide that you want to have a subcommittee that goes into the negotiations. So I'm just looking for some direction from you as to how you would like us to proceed. I know we do have a contract here. What would you call this, Mr. Wyatt? Understand it. Yeah. So that just that we are going to enter negotiations with the PAT. So that I think is going to be signed regardless. But we would like to know, as with the PAT, what format would you like to use?
Would the committee think it's beneficial to have at least one, in addition to the superintendent and our finance director, would it be beneficial to have one member of the school committee from each town? So that you have 5 people that are bargaining with the PAT. Yeah, just want to know whether you think that's a good idea or an unnecessary idea.
I think it's a good idea to those together. Kristen, you agree?
Was she first?
No, that's pretty.
So I have 2 thoughts. One is that at the very end of the last negotiations, there were some things that the school committee was brought into, and not having had somebody on the school committee been part of the discussions along the way, I had a hard time at that late hour kind of being able to voice an opinion because I didn't know all the circumstances. The second thing is since that last, we had the working group that kind of went through the what was it, addendum or whatever for the last contract, where there were provisional language there were a lot of very rich and good discussions with that we learned a lot about what the union may be looking for, what the district's constraints may be. So, and I was on that, and Emily was on it, Marie was on it for a little bit. I think having gone through that process gives us some more information that having school committee members on the negotiating committee, I think, would be helpful. That's my point of view.
to me, it doesn't matter how many, but I do feel like for some of the reasons that Chris mentioned, and also I think to support the, Dr. Lee and Greg, that it would be beneficial, for some school committee representation.
Any thoughts? So this is not up for a vote.
Are we okay with one person from each, or does it matter, from each town?
When do people meet during the day? Is there any particular time that everybody meets? Or is somebody scheduled better than a person?
Well, so for the teachers, it's gonna have to be 3:30 is the time that those meetings typically take place.
Yeah, we used to try to cap them at no more than 2 hours each time. That's how we've done it in the past, because after 2 hours, everybody just kind of gets punchy. So,
Although there is a technique where you keep people in a room until an agreement is decided, no food or drink until it's done.
yeah, they do that with roosters too.
That's
That's
wrong.
how they select a pope.
That is. They send the little white
Signal.
signal.
But yeah,
I'm
so
awful like the
3:30
fire
is
in
when
middle
those meetings
school.
start, but of course, we would have meetings as well, just going into it ahead of time.
And how often are the meetings held? Every week or?
Frequency of the meetings?
Like I said, the last time, things went along fairly well, so it's probably like every couple, 3 weeks. It depends on what analysis is being done. It's a little bit bigger gaps in the beginning, because, well, not the issues, the big thing obviously is salary proposals. And to do an analysis of that with, 200 people, to figure out where they could go and what they could be and the financial constraints, it takes some time, in addition to the fact that we're still working with high school projects, and that takes a lot of time out of our day to go to those meetings and things. So at the beginning, when the financial stuff is being proposed, you could probably do it every couple, 3 weeks. Or if there's a lot of other issues, you could still meet weekly, but don't touch the financial stuff except every third meeting or something, as you work on the other things, and you could play it that way as well. Again, those are the type of things you'll talk about in your first meeting and decide how you want to play this out. So I would sit there and say you're going to be doing it at least every other week, 3:30 to 5:30 is probably a reasonable assumption for the next few months.
Emily?
And I believe that last time around, you guys did go through the interest-based bargaining, protocol, yeah? So if that's, it's just a little, for people who haven't negotiated that way before, it can feel a little bit different. Sometimes there's training that people go through. When our negotiators in my school district switched to that, everyone kind of went through like a quick training, because it does feel a little bit different than the
No, you're right, it does.
other way of
Because you
doing
just
it.
sit in the room and talk.
Right, but so I just wanted to
Yeah.
know if that was still the plan for how that is. No. Okay.
Claire?
I'd be up for any format that these gentlemen decide that they think is the best. I like the idea of 3. We want 3 people on. I think in Merrimack's situation, myself personally, I think I've been involved too long that I might be biased one way or the other, extreme by on teacher contracts. So I'd probably want to dismiss myself, but I also know that some of these contracts can go on, be drawn out for a long time, and and it hasn't been that way in Pentucket. We've been very fortunate that the business manager and the superintendent, for the most part, was able to come to agreement. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen again, but I would think that we would need 3 people, if that's what you want, that can do it with the time, etc. And I think Merrimack would have a problem putting the person on, actually. And if you, not excluding itself. So if we went to one from each town, you're either gonna have somebody that's very biased, that has had a lot of experience in this, or you're gonna ask somebody, other two to do it that may not be available in the first place anyways. So if you like the idea of three, one from each town, then I suggest we kind of go with three very enthusiastic people that want to be part of the process and unbiased and do what's best for the teachers union and the towns.
Okay, so is there anybody interested? Dick?
It's been my experience with getting to yes, it's been very, very effective until we get into finances, and then that's a challenge. It's always been a challenge. I've been involved in that a number of times, and it's always been kissy-huggy until we mention finances, and then wow. Actually, I see what you said, not, that prejudice is, I don't see it as prejudice, I see it as experience, and I see that as a strength. I don't see that as a weakness or a hindrance, so I would disagree with you on that part.
Okay, so is anybody interested in serving on this committee a couple of times a month from 3 to 5 p.m. in the school committee? Yeah. Chris?
3:30 to 5:30? Not 3 to 5.
Well,
3:30.
it'd be 3:30 because
After
the elementary school teachers are out
Got
yet.
it. Just wanted to be clear. Got it.
So Chris
Maybe.
And a maybe.
I mean, I am, I would honestly need to know like what day of the week we're talking about before I can commit, because I have other commitments. both
It won't be
personal-
Friday.
Right. But I mean, I have
Yeah.
leadership obligations in my professional life that are already set for the rest of this school year, so if it's those days, I'm out.
Thank you, everybody.
Sure.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is policies. So we have to, the packet had, some of them filled out. I don't know, Marie, do you want to speak on these? Because, the JQ, the IMDC and ING ones, and all the other ones, there was a page on these in the packet. I don't know if you should call that separately.
Those are the ones.
Those are the
They're
ones
just
that
like
are
a summary of the ones we're
Oh,
doing,
okay.
Yep.
which is helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
I know I got all the other ones from. Anyway, okay. So, the first policy is JQ, student fees, fines, and charges.
I move JQ, student fees, fines, and charges.
Second?
Any discussion? Chris?
I like the language, thank you very much. I like the language, but I also like that there's a process that's identifiable that speaks to this, so I appreciate it. And I know it was hard to get that.
Bree did a good job bringing it up.
Emily actually helped with the language on this one, so thank
Not
you
on
to
that.
Emily.
Thank you to everybody.
But thank you for your feedback. And then Greg helped on the language as well.
So, any other discussion? Ryan?
Just a question. When it says in the very last paragraph, no, I'm happy. Because the next to last paragraph takes care of it.
What was the question? I'm sorry.
No, I'm
he's
happy.
good.
The
He's
next
fine.
to last-
For like, where's the question?
I'm sorry. I
No, I said
misunderstood.
I'm happy.
He's okay.
okay.
Permissible
We can't hear
penalties
you.
allow you for those seniors that still owe, you've got to have some kind of hold. And it has something there that enables administrators and/or to apply some type of
Okay.
restriction to seniors.
Any other questions? All in favor? Thank you. The next policy is IMDC, which is religious holidays. Can I receive a motion to accept the policy?
Move IMDC religious holidays.
Second.
Any discussion? Not seeing any, all in favor? The next policy is IMG, animals in school.
I move IMG animals in school.
Second.
Any discussion, Chris?
I know that this was a previous policy, so I don't, without going word for word through it,
Yeah.
was there any tangible changes?
Nothing tangible, honestly. It was like a couple of typos where there weren't commas
Okay.
or there weren't, you know, if was of, or that, but no big language changes at all.
And does administration know if this is what is actually being implemented at the schools?
Yeah, so, like with middle school, Dice, the retired, and now unretired, coming to the middle school, it has to be there. What I sent this to Mr. Kelly, just said, this is the current policy, could you please make sure that this is being followed? There's questions, so like in one of the first parts has to do with, the service animals. And it says, for the purpose of this policy, a service animal includes any dog that's been individually trained to do work or perform tasks for the benefit of an individual with a disability. So, in that instance, when we were talking with Dr. Green about Dice, in particular, Dice had a specific role. Dice has to be retrained in order to go into that new role. So, this guy's aware. I think we had that.
Well, I think actually Dice was trained globally and
Okay,
then individually, so
specifically
she
for that
actually.
thing. So I don't know what she takes out for the parts and how she, beyond my
Yeah, no, I know.
expertise.
I know. It's
But
amazing.
yes, we make sure that they are there for the intent.
But that would be the responsibility of the principals or the
It is principal.
administrator
Yep.
overseeing it to make sure that that
But Dr.
certificate or whatever.
Yep, and we
Dr.
said,
Green came and spoke to us.
Right.
And we were able to ask questions
and I sent this to, all the principals received this because we know this is, and I checked with other superintendents, they do have programs where there is service animal goes from school to school on a rotational basis, and that might be something we end up doing with Dice or another, some other dog.
Any other questions? All in favor? So that's it, I believe, for the policies. Any other public comment?
Talking about you, Mr. Crowley and I speak regularly and went through the process with the specialists in creating that schedule last year. I think from the DAT's perspective, and people know this, it's considered less than ideal. Certainly, to large comments about the well-being of both the staff and the students. Certainly, it's less than ideal from that standpoint. At the same time, we understand the process, we understand why the process is in place. And so we're looking at that. The jury is still out. We're going to look and see how the process plays out over the course of this year. And continue to get feedback from the specialists as to how things are playing out. We continue to have dialogue about that. I think in a nutshell, that's the perspective. Basically, the jury's still out. Let's see how it plays out this year. I have specialists continue to give feedback, even when it does feedback on things that they're seeing that are going wrong. So just some of the pockets of the schedule, I just had somebody actually say to me today, so I'm out on a day that I have like 3 blocks of prep, different scheduling. How do I get a sub to actually do that? The inverse of that is I have a sub, and I have 7 blocks midday, and that's the substitute.
Why are you using 7 blocks? You know we don't have 7 blocks.
6 blocks.
There we go.
So there's those little pockets that we got to see how those things go.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. So we need to enter into executive session to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of property if the chair declares that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiation position of the public body. So I believe we have to do roll call. We're not coming back. We need a motion first. A motion?
So moved. Second.
Okay. Can we roll call? Ben Adams?
Yes.
Dick Hodges?
Here.
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Marie?
Yes.
Emily? Yes. Liz? Yes. Okay, we're not coming back.
I didn't, he sent me an email saying, but I haven't looked at any of it.
So you were out getting your copy samples.
It's not what I was doing, but
I think I saw it.
he had, I know you saw it.
I'm like, what the heck?
He had extra ones, I just wanted to.
Lisa to sign this?
Lisa, what was that paper?
That's
That
okay.
one?
I didn't, the right thing to do.
Did you get?
Yes. Yeah, yeah, I figured I'd.
Whenever it's out.
Yeah, so maybe next Monday?
Review, yes, yeah, you know.
I was like, can you never see him? He's like, pretty much.
So I,
Review
usually
of staff.
I'll let him know.
Professional guy do it.
Thursday would probably be best, so.
Oh, God, yeah.
I'll make it work.
Well, that's what I didn't know what was going on. Some reason it was
Yeah, if you wanted to, yeah,
We
so
could
it's
sign
like
it.
wanna learn.
Signs it.
Yes, and
And everything's
when
happening.
we meet, just ask me whatever you want.
That's great.
Whatever you want to know about.
Sure, I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Yeah, I'll see you soon. Hi, I'm Heather.
Hi, Heather. Friend committee or?
Mike, who we need to have sign this?
School committee or?
Very good. You too?
That's why I asked it. I know it's
I
not
think
me.
I can do sign this.
All right.
But you're okay with the language, huh? You have that pen?
Yeah, that's the little, that's all. Just that little part of it, make sure you combine it all. There you go.
Thank you.
Oh, wait a minute. I can't put it away. I still gotta have finance subcommittee meeting after.
Yes, you do.
Damn.
That's nice, man.
There's a special, hey, you know why this pen's nice? It was free. So who gets,
Lisa needs to sign this. You
okay.
need that one, that too?
All right. Yeah. Let me go with,
Oh, the one that didn't work right, and we did it, oh, she signed it up. I didn't know that, but it was teachers. So I sent that email.
That downstairs now?